Hey, hello guys. So I hope all of you are doing well and fine and going through with the pace of the course in Power BI. And I hope all of you are clear with the concepts of Power Query transformation, which we have done in the fourth module. We have discussed in a lot of details about all the connectivity modes, about cleaning up the data, transforming and loading the data back into Power BI. Okay. So our next focus will be on to in this module 5. Our next focus will be on to modeling in Power BI, creating the data models in Power BI. Okay. But first of all, we have to be very clear with some terms before we jump into practical and we start working on the practical phase. We have to be very clear with the concept of modeling. What exactly is data modeling and why it is playing so much important role for a report in Power BI. Okay. So we'll see when we don't have the data model, what kind of problem we can have, and if we create the data models properly, then what benefits we are getting out of it. Okay. So let's start from that. And once we complete the introduction part, so the agenda of this session will be something like this. We'll have an introduction on the modeling. We'll work with the tables a lot. Okay. I'll show you a way to create a date table inside Power BI as well. Okay. And then we'll work with dimensions and the fact. We'll understand what is the meaning of star schema. Okay. And then we'll move forward for the relationships and cardinality. So in the first part, we'll introduce all the things to you, and in the coming up parts of this module, we'll do practical in Power BI. Okay, so let's start up. Yeah, so as I told you the agenda, this is the agenda of the data modeling module. The first part, introduction. So first of all, what exactly happens when we don't have a data model? See, if you are loading the data from a single table, if you are loading the data from a single source, maybe a single table, that looks okay. There is no problem with that. But when you have multiple tables from a single data source or multiple data sources, okay, so what you need to have is the relationship between the tables. Okay, otherwise what will happen? First of all, it will give you incorrect answers. It will not give you the correct answers between the numbers and the context. Okay, it will make very difficult for the stakeholders to understand the data and visualizations in Power BI. So when we create proper data models, it helps us to analyze the data in a very faster way, getting the correct answers, getting keeping the correct reports only, the required tables only. Sorry, okay, and the reports are very easier to maintain in the future as well. Okay, so if I just give you a brief small example here, this is kind of a schema which I have designed for some of my model. So just a snapshot of that to understand where we have the sales fact table in the center, and it is surrounded by all the dimension tables. It is surrounded by all dimension tables like product, customer, association, calendar, store, and a lot of dimension tables. Okay, so that's what our agenda is in this coming module. In this module part, that's what in the coming up part, that's what the agenda will be, to create such kind of a schema. Okay, to create a proper schema where the tables are all connected with each other in a very proper way. So that's what we have to look on this. Okay, so when we create relationship between the two tables, first of all, there is a very minute concept which has to be clear. I don't know that how many people are aware of that or not, but let's assume that we are starting from basics. So we're assuming that no one is aware of that. So no problem. When we create relationship between the tables must be having a primary key foreign key relationship. So there must be two keys, primary key, foreign key. Let me explain you the concept of this primary key, foreign key. What is the meaning of that? It's an example. Okay, so let's say we have product table, we have one product table, and we have one sales table. Okay, so the primary key means in the product table we have two columns, product ID and product name. So the primary key means a unique column, a column which is having unique values and not having any null values. So for example, here in the product table, we will have the product ID column as our primary key. Okay, which will be acting as a primary key. We'll have all unique values inside the product ID column, and there are no null values inside this column. And there we can have some product names for each and every product ID. So we'll mark that column to be a primary key of the table. Okay, and then in the sales fact table, on the other hand, on the sales fact table, we also have one product ID column, which will be referencing to our product table. So that will be our foreign key. So foreign key references to the product ID table, to the product ID column of product table. So what happens? What benefit we get from this relationship? First of all, a very basic benefit when we create this relationship. First of all, in the sales fact table, it will allow you to enter only those value of product ID value which are existing in your product table. We cannot enter a product entry into the sales fact table which the company is not selling. Okay, so that product ID must be existing already into the product ID column of your product table. Then only you can create, then only you can enter that value in the sales fact table as well. And similarly, you cannot delete the value from the product ID table because the product table, because it is referenced by some another table. So we cannot delete any product entry which is being referenced by the sales table. Okay, so to maintain the data security, to maintain uh, 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 the correctness in the data, we need this relationship to be done. It has been explained here with some example. You can go through this one as well. But I think what the example I have given, if you have any questions on that, please let me know. Let me explain in more detail. If you have any confusion left, I'll explain, give you a demo in a notepad file and make it more clear to understand. What I was telling is we have two tables. One is my product table and the other one is my sales table. So in the product table, I have two columns, as I have told you, the product ID and we have the product name. And in the sales table, we have lots of columns where we have the customer ID, where we have customer name, okay, amount, and but one of them column is product ID column as well. Okay, so inside, as I told you, this product ID column, I'll create it here as a primary key. That means this column cannot have any duplicate values inside that, and this column cannot have any duplicate value, plus this column cannot have any null values. It will have data something like that. For example, we have first product ID as shoes, second as socks. Okay, and we can have a number of entries like this. Okay, it cannot have a repeated value. It cannot have in this column, we cannot repeat the value 1 because it's a primary key, and we cannot even left it blank. We cannot left it null and some entry here inside the product name column. It's not allowed because it's a primary key column. So null is also not allowed here. So now in the customer ID, we'll create this column as a relationship with this column. It will reference as a foreign key to this primary key. Okay, so this will be my foreign key. And inside this entry, we can have one customer name, let's say Aman, some amount of 1,000. And the product ID, it's referring to 1. That's absolutely correct, no problem. But later on, if someone is inserting an entry as 2, Raman, maybe 2,000, and if they are entering product ID 3, which is not existing here, so that's an incorrect entry. It will not allow us to do that because we have a relationship between these two tables. So this maintains our data correctness. First point. Second point, later on, let's say suppose if we want to delete this entry, but we have an entry here which is referencing to product ID 1. So we cannot delete this entry from here. First, we have to delete this entry from here. Then only we can go and delete this entry from here as well. Okay, so make sure that this correctness is, that's why we need this primary key foreign key relationship to be created to maintain the correctness between the data. Okay, so that's our first point. Let's go back here. I hope you are clear with my point, what I wanted to tell. So Power BI is a beautiful tool to correct these relationships because we can get data from n number of sources. We can get data from Excel, we can get data from SQL Server, we can get data from Oracle, from web, from forms, from n number of places. Okay, so for coming the data when data is coming from different sources, maybe possible the relationships are not established automatically. We have to go and maintain that relationship manually. So that's what we will do. Okay. So now let's talk about the schemas. What is the meaning of a schema? If you remember, initially in the initial half of our modules, I have explained you a word between dimension tables and the fact table. What is the meaning of exactly a dimension table and a fact table? The fact table is the one, if any confusions here, I'm summarizing it in a small way. Fact table is the one which has the numbers, the columns of numbers on which we need to do analysis, which we need to do perform the calculations. Like we need to perform sum of sales, sum of quantity, order number of quantity, That means count of quantity, average, maximum, minimum, standard deviation, variance. So all the statistics will apply on those kind of columns. Those, the table which is having these kind of columns, it's your fact table. Okay. And to do analysis on these numbers, we need some context to add. Like I want to see analysis based on a product number. I want to see analysis based on my product name. How many shoes have been sold? How many stocks have been sold? How many? What is the total sum amount, sales amount for shoes? What is the total sales amount for socks? Maybe some employee context, that how many shoes have been sold by a particular employee A in this particular time period. So we need to give some context to that analysis. So for that context, we use the dimension tables. So once we create the proper data model, it looks like something like that. It looks like a star shape, okay, where we have the fact table in center, and all the fact tables are connected to the dimension tables. Okay, so that we can have a proper cardinality between the data. I'll explain the use of this word cardinality in some coming time. So let's keep in the mind for right now, that's the kind of relationship between the tables. We have a proper relationship established between the tables. Okay, that's what my point is. So we have two main schemas which follow into the industry, which is followed by the industry in Power BI or any other data modeling as well. It's star schema and snowflake schema. The star schema and snowflake schema. If you have a look here on this star schema, in this course coming up in the coming up modules, we'll work on with the star schemas only, with the star schema only. But I will introduce you here what is exactly snowflake schema as well. So if you look on this star schema model, we have a fact table in center, as I told you, and this is connected to all our dimension tables. But we cannot have a relationship between the two dimensions directly in the snowflake schema, in the star schema, sorry. In the star schema, you can have a look here. The dimension tables are all connected to our center fact table, but the two dimensions are not connected to each other. Okay, but in some cases, it may be possible that you have to connect two dimensions as well with each other. For example, let's say I have a country dimension and I have a state dimension. Okay, to make sure the data correctness of the entry of data correctness in these two tables as well, that we are not entering a value of a state which is in which country we don't have an office. So to make sure the relationship properly established between the dimensions as well, sometimes we need to connect the dimension tables as well with each other, and that will move forward to a snowflake schema. So a very important interview question as well. What is exactly the difference between star schema and snowflake schema? The star schema is the one where we have a star kind of a shape model created, where we have the fact table in center, and it is connected to all our dimension tables. Okay, but the dimension tables are not connected with each other. And the snowflake, the same, it will be like this. The fact table will be connected to all the dimensions, but the dimensions can also have a connection with each other in the snowflake schema. So in this course, we'll be following with the star schema. As per your requirement, you need to decide which kind of model is required for your project. Okay. So as I have already explained these words for you, what are the two keywords here, the fact table and dimension table. I hope you understood it. But for any description, you can pause it here and have a look on this description part as well. Okay, but I'm happy with this right now. So I don't want this. So now we are clear with the basic terms. We are clear with the basic terms here, that what exactly is the meaning of the stars, what exactly is the meaning of a data model, why it is required first of all, and then why what is the meaning of the star schema, what is the meaning of the fact table and dimension table first of all, and then what is the meaning of different two types of schemas, and why do we need to create what is the meaning of a schema, and how many kind of schema we have, the star schema and the snowflake schema, and what are the differences between these two kind of schemas. Okay, so now we can go into Power BI and we can have a look onto our data set, which we have already loaded. If you have not done, if you're still into Power Query Editor, what you can do is you can just go and click on close and apply. It will load your data set into Power BI desktop. Sorry, it will load the data here into the Power BI desktop. One more very important point which I want to mention here before you load the data set, make sure that you are loading the required tables only. Maybe possible you have merged up the tables, maybe possible you have removed the unwanted tables or something like that. Some tables are not required to be loaded into our data set. So what you can do is, for example, I have merged the data from data set into my sales fact. So I don't want this data set to be loaded separately. I want already loaded data here in sales spec. So I don't want this data set to be loaded here separately. So what I will do is I'll right click on the table name and disable. It's already disabled, but by default you will get something like this. By default it is enabled. It is enabling the load. So if I load this data set, this table will also load. But I don't want this table to be loaded separately. What I will do is I'll right click on the table name and I'll disable this checkbox. I'll uncheck this box. Okay. So now it has been, this box is unchecked. So when I will load the data into my data set, this table will not load. Make sure that you are loading the required tables only. Okay. Unwanted tables, the tables which are not required, they must not be loaded. We have already make sure that we have cleared the required rows. We have cleared the unrequired columns. So if you have not done, make sure you are doing it, because as I already told you, we should try to keep the tables as much small in the numbers as possible. Okay, it is always better to have 5, 6, 7, 8 tables instead of having 40, 30, 40 tables, 20, 30 tables in your data set, because it creates a lot of confusion in the mind of stakeholders for taking the data excuse me, for analysis purpose. And even the unwanted columns must not be there. So make sure that you have removed them before creating the model. Okay. So now hit on close and apply. It will start loading the data here. I have already done it. There are no changes. So it's loaded now. And now if we go back here in the 3 canvases, which I told you in the beginning of this course, second part is having our data, where we can have the look on all the tables of data, the data of all the tables. We can have a look on them here. Okay, it's wonderful. Our data is working absolutely fine. What is the concept of this mark as date table? I'll show you very later on, little bit later on. Wait for some time. And we can add some extra columns and all those things from here as well. For that, we need to learn text expression. You will be learning in some coming time, in coming up modules. So now if we go to this relationship here, the relationship model option here, we'll find the relationships already created for some of the tables. We'll find that the relationships are already created for some of the tables. It is already working. Okay, but for some of them, it's not created. So that we have to do manually. Okay, so let's say for example, let's say for this first example right now, in case we can see here, just a small demo I'm giving to you, the importance of the relationship. Then what is the meaning of this 1, 2 star, how to create this and all that we'll discuss in the coming up part of this module. For a just to understand purpose, if I remove this relationship, you can see here these two tables right now, the product ID and the product and the sales fact, the same example which I was using here. Okay, so these two tables are similarly connected here using the product ID column. As soon as I click on this, I can see that these two tables are connected these using these two columns from the two tables. If I remove this relationship, and let's see what will happen. As soon as I remove the relationship between the two tables, oh, it has removed the table. I don't want to remove the table. I wanted to remove the relationship. Okay, no problem. We'll go back here. By mistake, we have removed it from the model. So I'll click on close and apply. So it will load it again. No big problem. By mistake, we have removed the fact table, and the fact table I cannot see. Yes, our fact table has been removed from the data set. Oh, that's a big by chance mistake I have done. What I'll do, I'll load that table again. Once again, I have to load the fact table. So I click on get data once again. Definitely, we have to go there. That can be happen from you as well. So make sure that how to take it back. Click on connect. Once again, go to your Power BI.accdb data set. So we'll get the fact table once again, and we'll click on transform data, as we have to make some necessary changes once again. It is now here, and we'll change the date data type, and the other columns are looking fine, no problem. So I'll click on close and apply. Will load my fact table here, and it will create the relationship once again. Okay, just give me one moment. As the data set is little huge inside the sales fact table, it may take a little time to load. Okay, I hope you can understand that. In case, in case if you lost any table, in case if you lost the data from any of the table, you need to click back to the get data option, go back to your data set from data source from where you are importing the data, and select the required table only. Select the only, because these 4 tables are already loaded. We don't need to load them once again. Make sure that you are selecting the correct required table only to load it once again in the data set. So it is taking a bit of a time to load once again. What I'll do is I'll pause the video for some time, and then we'll start once again, so that it will not be a wastage of time for us. I'll pause the video. Meanwhile, it will be loaded, and then we'll start once again about the other part. So meanwhile, you also perform the same things. Make sure that you are clear with the basics, and then you are practicing the things. We'll continue with the same topic in this module. Okay. I think it's done now. We are happy with this. So what I was telling, if you can see here, we must got our sales fact table. Yes, it is here, and we got it once again. So that's wonderful. Yes, the relationships are once again created. So if we see here, if I create a total sum of revenue, I want to see my total sum of revenue. It is coming up here, and I want to see it as per each of every product category. What I'll do is I'll go into the product table and I'll see it maybe category wise. So we have a correct relationship between the tables, and the reason because of that we are getting the exact correct answers for each and every category of product. If for rural category, for urban, for rural, for our third category, which is mix, and the fourth one is youth, we are getting the exact correct numbers. But if we go on to this relationship option here, and if we click on this relationship to be deleted, okay, I have deleted the relationship. That's what my purpose last time as well. If we go back here, can you see we start getting the incorrect answers? We are getting the same value for each and every category. We are getting the same value for each and every category, which is definitely not correct. So that is what the importance of a data model. Okay, so that's what we will learn in coming half of this module. That what is the requirement of the relationship, and how do we create them. Okay, so once again we'll create the relationship between these two tables and other tables as well. So thank you for till here. You go through the basics, and then we'll connect next in the second half. Thanks once again.